You're now listening to All Hogs Sports, covering all Arkansas Razorback sports, such as football, basketball, baseball, and much more. Now, here's your host for today's show, Sam Stimson.
This Saturday, Arkansas has another top 25 game, none other than at AT&T Stadium in Jerry World. The number 10 Arkansas Razorbacks take on the 23-ranked Texas A&M Aggies in the Southwest Classic. September 24th, this Saturday at 6 p.m. on ESPN. This is the first game for Arkansas that is away from home. It's not a road game, but it is a neutral site game, so Arkansas is going to have to deal with some amount of sound coming from one half of the stadium while they're on offense. And speaking of offense, the Arkansas Razorbacks offense led by KJ Jefferson. Jefferson with a 70.5 completion percentage so far throughout 3 weeks this season, with 6 touchdowns and an interception off a dropped pass. 770 yards through the air, 46 carries, and 169 yards, and 3 touchdowns on the ground. Something I've seen from KJ this season that I absolutely love is when Arkansas has drives where the game is either slipping away from them or they have to score to basically keep themselves in the game. Arkansas has done that. KJ has been resilient on cooking with this offense, especially when it is most needed. You look back at the Missouri State game, especially in that fourth quarter, and KJ Jefferson really getting it done there. It's almost like that dog mentality. And, KJ's got that dog in him. When Arkansas needs to score, KJ finds ways to get things done on the ground. Obviously, with his rushing ability, 2 ends of the field open for him on RPO reads, on design runs for either him or the running back. Arkansas, though, on offense is going to run the football a lot. When you have one of the best offensive lines in the Southeastern Conference and in the nation, you are going to run the ball a lot, and Arkansas is going to continue to do this, especially against Texas A&M. KJ just makes things happen, like I said, and he's got all the tools in the bag with a wide receiver rotation that we're finally seeing some consistency from and kind of know those top guys. First one, obviously, Jadon Haselwood, 13 catches for 158 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's been Arkansas's most consistent wide receiver on seeing the field and seeing targets by a game-per-game basis. He's got the speed and this impressive size as well. You look back to South Carolina when he shrugged off the defender. Next up, wide receiver Matt Landers in the rotation, a team-high 14 catches and 211 yards. Huge game versus Missouri State. Sam Pittman was talking about how Landers was kind of down on himself after the South Carolina game because he dropped that deep pass late into the game. And you like to see guys rebound like that. It doesn't really matter what happens in the past. It matters what you can do in the future. Like I say every week, something that Arkansas talks about a lot in the locker room is right now Arkansas is 0-0 this week. Arkansas hasn't won a game. Arkansas's goal is to be 1-0 this week. Your goal as a receiver is to play well this week. You got to put it behind you and produce. He's been practicing really well all offseason. You'd love to see that turn into some production on the field. Warren Thompson as well, 6 catches, 65 yards, and a touchdown. He's a huge blocker in this scheme as well. Now, tight end Trey Knox has been nursing a little bit on an ankle sprain. I'm talking about blocking. He's been huge in Arkansas's rushing game as well. And with the blocking, 10 catches for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. Looked really good against the Cincinnati team, and then had a little injury against South Carolina. Hasn't really seen that many targets, but the healthier he is, the more times that the ball will be showed his way. And then also at the end of the rotation, wide receiver Kedron Jackson, 2 catches for 71 yards. And then also in the game, you'll see checkdowns to Rocket Sanders, A.J. Green, and any of those running backs in the Arkansas passing game. Talked a little bit about Arkansas's offensive line previously, but those guys are big and experienced, lots of returning starters. All those guys have also been healthy this season. Dalton Wagner, right tackle, standing up strong. We've kind of seen him get injured across the last few years, but doing good now. Stromberg, especially in center, has been dominant. They've been able to handle up front, and the team's averaging well over 5 yards per carry, which is awesome to see. Like I said earlier about the passing game, 256.7 yards through the air, 243.7 yards on the ground, which I'll get to the running back room here in a second. 500 yards of offense averaging per game with 37 points per game. Those are fantastic numbers for an offense, and if Arkansas can just keep that up, expect them to win a lot of games in the SEC. I mean, you can put up high-scoring numbers. But the rushing game, Rocket Sanders. Now, the chances of a running back winning Heisman are extremely low. But after 3 weeks, I think Rocket Sanders, out of anybody on Arkansas' team, should have the highest Heisman odds. The way this guy's running down the field with explosiveness, speed, acceleration is unmatched throughout anyone in the Arkansas running back room, and that's why he's getting 20-plus carries per game. He's on a whole different level and has been locked in. 440 yards this season, good for first in the SEC, 6.7 average yards per carry, 3 touchdowns. And after 3 weeks, we've finally been getting that recognition for Rocket Sanders from the national media that he deserves. This is a guy who could and should be considered as one of the best backs in the SEC. Also, you'll have A.J. Green and Rashad Dumian. Both of those guys been getting some looks in the rushing game. And then also Dominique Johnson should be back this game, averaged 5.9 yards per carry in 2021, and finished off the 2021 season as Arkansas's starting running back. DJ feeding into the running game, but really it's going to be the show of Rocket Sanders. Arkansas could run the ball 40-plus times, and 25 of those carries are going to be from Rocket Sanders. I really like the looks we can throw in there with Rashad, AJ, DJ, all those different guys to kind of throw them off tempo, expecting for a rocket run, 2 running back sets. Arkansas has well over 70% of play calls being run the ball, and that's what they'll continue to do against many, many teams. Now this game is
versus
the Texas A&M Aggies, led by their defense. Arkansas's best part of their team is their offense. Aggies' best part of their team, their defense. So we'll be seeing a good matchup here. You don't want to miss this one. Texas A&M is allowing 8.7 points per game after playing Sam Houston State, Appalachian State, who they lost to notably, and then also Miami, Florida. Main point has been 147.3 passing yards allowed. And the safety group, nickelback as well, Antonio Johnson plays a little bit of both. He did leave the game with an injury, but should play against Arkansas. If you don't remember last season, he was on Traylon Burks, and Burks actually had a nice move against him pretty early on, was able to get a long touchdown. But obviously Burks is now playing for the Tennessee Titans, a first-round draft pick. Receivers like Burks, they don't come around that often. Johnson's a really fast corner, though. He's great in zone and man coverages. Arkansas is going to have to throw a number of different looks his way to get him caught up. Also, safety Damani Richardson, 13 total tackles and 1 pass deflection on the season. Against Miami, he was ejected in the first half due to targeting, but he will return in this game. And then safety Jordan Gilbert, team leading 1 interception and 10 total tackles. Keep it in the secondary. Cornerback Deuce Harmon, 3 starts as reserve last season, and then also at corner Tyreek Chappell. He was a 2021 All-Freshman. This is a very talented group with lots of good players. Against Miami, Florida, they had 2 of their best 8 players. 6 of them were out, but they still looked pretty good. A number of guys also got suspended against Miami, Florida, along with 2 targeting ejections, and then Johnson's injury. A couple of those guys were in the secondary, and they all will be back for this game against Arkansas. I'll talk about one of them coming up on the offense, Shamar Stewart for Texas A&M. But those guys will be back for this one. A couple other corners, Denver Harris, Smoke Bowie, both of those guys were 2 of the suspended players. And then Bryce Anderson, Jacoby Matthews as safeties. This is a lot of talent. I mean, Texas A&M number 1 class last year, Stewart being along those guys, Anderson, Matthews as well. In the secondary, 4 out of 5 of the starters are sophomores, with the other one being a junior. Now, Texas A&M's arguably best linebacker and most experienced, Andre White Jr., is out of this game. And if you don't remember, Texas defensive coordinator Mike Elko actually left for a head coaching job At Duke, he's doing really good there. But now the Aggies hired DJ Durkin. If you don't remember Durkin, he schemed for Ole Miss the last 2 seasons. And we all remember the Arkansas-Ole Miss last game where it was just a complete shootout. At linebacker, you'll be seeing a lot of 2 linebacker sets, though. At that middle linebacker position, you'll see Chris Russell Jr. with 19 total tackles. And then at the wide linebacker side, you'll see A&M's better linebacker, Edrin Cooper. He gets a lot of big plays and big impacts last season for A&M. And then also these 2 guys, Russell, Cooper, they make a good solid 2 linebackers for the system. You'll obviously see rotations. But when you're running a 2 linebacker system with either 6 guys in the secondary or 4 guys up front, you need solid linebackers, and A&M does have that. The loss of Andre White Jr., though, is definitely hurting them. A&M lost a lot of talent last season on the defensive line. They're replacing 4 starters up front. As a team, the Texas A&M defensive line has only managed to get 4 sacks throughout 3 weeks. At edge rushers, you got Vidal Diggs and then Antonmai Adeli. Didn't see the field last year most for these 2 guys. And then backups, LT Overton had 1 sack for A&M's defensive line edge rushers. And then Stewart, the other defensive edge backup. Overall, their edge rushers are all right, but they do struggle with a lack of experience. Obviously very talented, but experience is everything, especially in the SEC. And when you lose 4 starters to your edge rushers, that is very costful. Inside on the defensive line for the Aggies is Shamar Turner, sophomore, and then McKinley Jackson, junior. You also see some of Walter Nolan, a freshman number 1 recruit in the nation. He's very talented. Overall, though, this is the weak link of the defense for Texas A&M. Texas A&M has been able to win against Miami really due to their defense. It's been the stronger point of their team, as I'll get to their offense later, which has been struggling. But A&M's defense, especially last few seasons, was really good, and it's the same thing this year. Miami did get 4.9 yards per rush. Arkansas has a favorable matchup up front, given the offensive line and the defensive line inexperience, but that Aggie secondary is going to hold very good zone coverages. And then when Arkansas is just running the ball constantly, not throwing it, you'll see them load the box, pull secondary guys up. So Arkansas still has to have a passing game, and that includes getting guys like Landers, Haselwood, Knox, all getting targets, moving the ball down the field, passing and running. Give KJ time as well for the offensive line, not just run protection, pass protection too. Really going to be fought up front, and if Arkansas can control that, I like their odds in this matchup of the Arkansas offense versus the Aggies defense. Now the Hogs defense, starting it off with the secondary that has been the concern for a lot of Razorback fans and outsiders, and it totally makes sense. Arkansas' secondary has had 2 issues, one of them being just reads and being in the right spot, and then the other one has been missed tackling. Something huge, though, before I get into anything, is Arkansas will get Miles Slusher back for the Texas A&M game. On Tuesday practice, he was a full participant. Arkansas getting him back will be absolutely huge in the game. And you look at last season when Jalen Catalon went down with a shoulder injury, Arkansas was still able to win 4 more games if you count the injury against A&M as, the point, because Arkansas then played Georgia the next week. So after Arkansas started 4-0, they were able to get 5 more wins with a banged-up secondary. Miles Slusher was absolutely huge in that. Getting him back to play that safety role is huge. And Malik Chavis has been a guy who's stepped up as well. He can play corner, can play safety. Getting him on the field has been important. And Hudson Clark actually had a really solid game against Missouri State. He had a pass deflection and didn't see any targets his way. Dwight McLaughlin had 2 picks, and he's back after a hamstring injury. McLaughlin in some shorter type coverages has been really good, but there's been a couple times this season where receivers have went a little bit further, and then off the bat he's gotten beat. So getting safety help on his side. And mainly it comes down to safety zone coverages and helping out the strong side defender on a lot of the passing plays. Guys in the secondary, you'll see Simeon Blair, 22 total tackles with 1 pass deflection. Latavius Brini, 14 total tackles. Ladarius Bishop, cornerback, is still out. Do not expect to see him against Texas A&M unless something changes. At corners, Arkansas has many different options with Clark, Dwight, and Chavis. And then in nickelback, you'll either see Brini or Slusher. Probably going to be Brini in that nickelback role better in some tighter coverages. And then free safety, I think you'll see Miles Slusher back there. Strong safety, Simeon Blair. And then you'll see Jaden Johnson and Chavis roll into different spots, take different coverages, some of the nickelback role as well. Arkansas comes down to the end of the day, corners doing better in their matchups man-to-man, and then the zone help as well. Tackling as well goes along with the whole status quo here. In the FBS, Arkansas is dead last in passing yards allowed per game. 352.7 yards is awful, and I don't expect that number to stay that high, but given the situations of the injuries and also we've played better teams, and something else is not really making excuses for this because, yes, this is still an awful stat, and everyone who's an Arkansas fan will know and will agree that something has to be done about this passing defense. But Arkansas's had the lead in a lot of games, except for the Missouri State one, and teams have been throwing the ball a little bit more, so it'll be interesting to see if Arkansas plays against a team that run the ball more if this goes down. But when it comes to the end of the day, yes, this is still a concern for the Razorbacks. I cannot talk enough about the man himself, Drew Sanders. 16 solo tackles, 5.5 sacks, tied for second in the nation in sack totals as an outside linebacker and edge rusher. Sanders hits hard. He plays hard. He's athletic, freakishly on the field, and his dominance has been proven on the football field. Him on this Arkansas defense is absolutely dangerous. He's a one-man wrecking crew. And next to him, a partner in crime, Bumper Poole. Poole has had a pretty good season. You know, his tackling rate could always get better. At the end of the day, if Poole can just tackle better, I think it'll make everything a little bit easier, especially stopping the run. And then also Chris Paul Jr., another linebacker. Something Arkansas has done, speaking of the run, is allowing 68.3 rushing yards per game. And that really starts up front with some of the interior guys like defensive linemen Eric Gregory, Isaiah Nichols, Cam Ball, Terry Hampton. Most of those guys are playing more inside, and they've been incredible against stopping the run. Same goes for Sanders, Poole, the guys coming up and getting tackles. But then Arkansas's pass rush has been incredible as well. 17 sacks is good for first in FBS. Arkansas leads the nation in sacks, and then Arkansas's dead last in passing yards allowed. That is a very two-sided statistic that is kind of unbelievable for most teams. Defensive end Jordan Dominic has been fantastic. 4 sacks. He's been dominant off the edge, getting around left tackles, right tackles, whenever he's placed on both ends. Zach Williams, 2.5 sacks. Landon Jackson, 1.5 sacks. Something we're seeing from Jackson is he's playing confident. He's using his athleticism that he's had and really wasn't using last season to the best of his ability at LSU. Now he's converting that to the football field. Overall, Arkansas has done a fantastic job blitzing 4-man fronts, bringing up Sanders on different fronts, even seeing some blitz packages with Jaden Johnson, a safety who has 2 sacks. No word on Jashad Stewart, one of the starters for Arkansas's defensive line. Getting him back would be beneficiary. Arkansas has 8 turnovers on the season, didn't force any against Missouri State, but gave up here. Key thing here, though, is Arkansas winning the turnover battle. If they can force more turnovers, which we saw against South Carolina and Cincy, then they give up. Obviously, huge there in Arkansas' success overall on defense. Closing notes on defense, though. Secondary has to be better. Getting Slusher back, linebacker, defensive line, stopping the run has been there all season for Arkansas. With Texas A&M's offense, they have moved to a different quarterback, switching over to Max Johnson after Haynes King put up only 100 total offense yards against Appalachian State. Max Johnson last week against Miami was 10 for 20, 140 yards and 1 touchdown, which was good enough to win A&M the game against Miami. Really, the main thing for Johnson is at LSU and A&M, he's a really good game manager, a facilitator. There's very rare times where, he kind of goes out of that. He could scramble. We saw that a little bit last season, scrambling a little bit too much against Arkansas specifically. But he's got a good arm. He's not like an awful quarterback, not bad, but he's not elite. He's just kind of middle of the line facilitator for this offense. And A&M has so much talent on offense that if he can just serve that role, the Aggie offense will be a lot better. When you talk about this A&M offense under Jimbo Fisher doing all the play calling, the offense is very old. The playbook that A&M runs is very sophisticated, very older type spread offense, and it hasn't been effective for A&M this season. They got the win against Miami due to the quarterback change, in my opinion. They probably will stick with Johnson for the rest of the season, and he runs that offense a lot better. At wide receiver, though, they have an absolute great guy in Aniyah Smith, 5'10", speedy, fast wide receiver, 14 catches for 259 yards and 1 touchdown. And then you also see Devon Achane, the running back, getting involved in the passing game last game. Out of Johnson's 10 completions, 4 of those were to Achane for 42 yards. So lots of dump-offs in this offense. Chase Lane, wide receiver 2, 3 catches for 31 yards. And then Evan Stewart, 10 catches for 65 yards. Stewart, last year's class, is one of the best wide receivers. He's a fantastic route runner, burst opens pretty easily, and can burn guys deep. With Johnson, Stewart, they haven't played a game together yet because Stewart was out last game due to the suspension. Other guys, Chris Marshall, freshman wide receiver, Devin Price. Lots of talent in this Aggie secondary. And Johnson, if he can manage that secondary and just kind of be a facilitator, that's what this offense needs. Now, the A&M offensive line is a bit concerning after they lost Kenyon Green last season and their offensive line coach. 4 out of 5 starters returned, and center Bryce Foster is now back. He was out the first 2 games due to mono. He wasn't at 100% against Miami, but he'll obviously be a lot better now. And then other guys like Ruben Fathertree, very good offensive linemen. But outside of that, A&M has had some struggles up front. We even saw it against Appalachian State. They were able to get some good pressure up front, and Arkansas's defensive line has been on a mission so far this year. Texas A&M's offense is averaging 208 passing yards per game, a lot of those coming against Sam Houston State in their opener, and only 105.7 yards on the ground. A lot of those are coming from Devon Achane. 46 attempts, 196 yards so far throughout 3 games, and 2 touchdowns. If you look at the running back 2 for A&M, he has 6 carries, so we'll primarily see Achane and then Max Johnson on the run. Like I said, spread passing for A&M, but the run scheming is very zone-based with Achane, and with him being very fast and exploding downfield, he's going to generate a lot of missed tackles. And for an Arkansas secondary that struggled to wrap up against Missouri State, that's a matchup that I do not like for the Razorbacks. Hitting off some quick special teams notes for both teams before I get to some other notes about the line and history. Randy Bond, the kicker for A&M, he was 1 for 1 with a 26-yard field goal against Miami. And then their punter, Nick, 44.3 average yards per punt. He's great at punting inside the 20. Like I said about earlier, Achane is their kick returner, very fast, speedy guy. Smith at punt returner, same situation there. Arkansas's punter, Max Fletcher, Aussie-style punter, hasn't been really asked much because Arkansas is scoring 37 points per game, but he's been good at punting inside the 20. Same thing with Cam Little. Arkansas has been finding the red zone, finishing a lot of drives, so he hasn't been asked of much. He does have 1 miss on the season, but he's perfect and extra points. Punt returner Bryce Stevens had an 82-yard kick to the house and Donald W. Reynolds. Razorback Stadium went insane. Highlighted the Mo State game there for sure. And then kick returner for Arkansas, A.J. Green. With punt return, kick return, don't expect a lot to be taken back against A&M. When you have a lot of talent, your special teams is a lot more talented, and so forth. Arkansas probably going to take a lot of touchbacks in this one. You could see a little bit more from Cam Little, though, as Arkansas may not finish drives at the clip like they did the first 3 weeks by playing a tougher defense.
It's time for Sam's prediction.
I've got Arkansas winning this one 23-21. Main thing is I like Arkansas's matchup up front a lot. Arkansas's offensive line against an A&M team that lost 4 defensive line starters over the offseason. I also think KJ Jefferson is just that guy. He gets things done and finds ways to respond when the defense lets up touchdowns. Arkansas will have a better secondary performance against Missouri State in terms of relative comparison against the FCS team versus a Power 5 team, but I do still think there's going to be concern in the secondary, and missed tackles are going to happen. Arkansas just doesn't have the talent or Jalen Catalon basically to make up for the amount of gaps between the depth we're seeing right now. Getting Miles Slusher back is huge, and him at free safety will give Arkansas a lot more cushion. I expect to see a lot of Malik Chavis working in a lot of different sets as a defensive back. Arkansas overall just has to be versatile, and their coverages in zone and man just have to be better, and safety help is crucial more than ever. But I do like the Hogs' chances in this game. It's going to be a close one. It may not be like like last season where Arkansas just went out to a lead very early, just because of the secondary and things like that. But if Arkansas can control the tempo, that would be positive. Not sure if I'll get the A&M recap out on Monday and maybe Tuesday. I'll keep you updated on Twitter at AllHogSportsPod. Again, that's Twitter at AllHogSportsPod. Not really sure yet, but going down for the Dallas game and really excited for this weekend. It's going to be a fun one at Jerry World. Signing off for now, though. Woo Pig Suey.
That's all for today's episode of All Hog Sports with Sam Stimson. Make sure to stay tuned for the next episode covering all Arkansas Razorback sports. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social media too. On Twitter and Instagram at All Hog Sports Pod. Like on Facebook at All Hog Sports and Arkansas Razorbacks Podcast. And on YouTube at that same name. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Go Hogs!